Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have Rick French of Alaska Alpine Outfitters on the phone. Rick, how you doing?
I'm great, Jay. How are you?
Good. The last time I think we talked, you had a late season Arizona elk tag, a rifle tag, up, and I believe Unit 23, and you were able to harvest a nice bull, and you had a pretty good time on that hunt. I remember you pounded it pretty hard. How have things been going since then?
Man, they've been going well. No worries, no complaints. Got
Well,
business is going good. Regular job's going good, and in between there, I'm getting some hunts in for myself as well.
that's awesome. You guys put out a DVD, Black Shale White Sheep, and I remember 4 or 5 years ago getting that, or 3, 4, 5 years ago, I don't remember exactly, getting that DVD. And for someone that hasn't hunted Dall Sheep, that was just an awesome video. Have you done any videos since, or was that just kind of a one time thing and got your fill of it?
It's pretty much one time thing. At the time, I was a bit of a hunting video junkie. I probably had 50 hunting DVDs in my next to my TV, and for the life of me, you could not buy a Dall Sheep hunting DVD back then, and I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna make one. So I think I filmed for 5 or 6 years, something like that. Packed 13 extra pounds of gear around the mountains and filmed 11 successful hunts. I think I actually had about 25 hours of footage I sent off to the editors, and there was a few hunts that I was unable to get the kill shots on, so we didn't use those hunts. But yeah, it's a hour and a half long and 11 successful hunts, and I think it was the first sheep hunting DVD to hit the market at the time. Now there's several good companies out there putting sheep hunting videos out, but yeah, I actually just got tired of carrying around a 75-pound backpack, so I just did the one video.
Well, I remember really liking it. How long have you been up in Alaska, and when did you start guiding? Kind of give me a brief bio of your love for Alaska and how all that started.
Gosh, I moved to Alaska in 1995. I was a 21-year-old kid, and the only reason I moved up there is because it was the only place you could hunt sheep annually every year without drawing a permit. So I moved up there for that reason, and geez, I got my guide license in 1999, and if I want to say I started guiding in 2001, and I've been doing it ever since. I started my own business in 2006, and just love it. It's just I just love stomping around the mountains for 30, 40 days at a time, and
For sure.
leaving the traffic and the stoplights behind.
For sure. And how many Dall sheep have you harvested yourself personally?
Oh, personally, I've gotten three,
Nice.
and
And,
and
and
that's it. Yeah, the rest of them I've just guided. I don't know how many I've packed off the mountain. Probably I thought about that actually about a week ago, and I think I'm about 50.
50. Wow. That now are those all Dall, or is that Dall, Stone, Desert, and Bighorns?
Those are all dolls. Yeah,
Wow.
I've harvested two bighorns personally, and I think I've probably been in on another 4 or 5 bighorn hunts for friends or family. But primarily, it's been my experience has been Dall sheep in Alaska.
What are you seeing with well, let's back up. For those that don't really know how Alaska works, can you explain the draw system? Because I believe there's a draw system, and then there's over-the-counter tags where you can just buy tags. And specifically, I'm talking right now about Dall sheep. Can you explain how that works a little bit?
You bet. Yep, absolutely. By a large measure, the most of the state is on a harvest ticket, which is simply a tag you can buy over the counter. And there are a few limited areas in the state where it's a draw, and those areas it's either a draw for to produce trophy quality rams, or the areas are so road accessible they limit the hunters so the sheep basically don't get over harvested. And there are some areas that annually produce some giant sheep, no doubt about it. But if you don't draw a permit, it's not a game stopper by any means. You can go with an outfitter if you're a non-resident or if you're a resident, you can just buy a tag over the counter and charter a bush plane and off you go.
So if you're a resident, you can hunt Dall sheep every year, and that was one of the things that drew you to Alaska, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
And
Yep.
would you say that because residents can hunt Dall sheep, I mean, do the sheep get pounded, or is it like anything else that there are areas that get pounded and then there's areas that are untouched?
Yeah, it's anymore. 20 years ago, I think there's a substantially more hunters now than there was in '95 for sure. And where I guide up in the Brooks Range, it's about as remote as you can get in North America. And we start with the last probably 4 or 5 years, we've started to see other resident hunters in the area as well. Whereas before, you could fly in there and be in there for 40 days, and I mean, you'd hear some bush planes flying over every now and then, but for the most part, you wouldn't see anybody. It was pretty remote. But anymore, I'm in all the other states I hunt in the lower 48, it's just become blatantly obvious to me that there's not enough real estate and a lot of hunters.
Yeah,
About the best way to put it.
it kind of seems that way all over now. Tell me a little bit about the Brooks Range historically and what's going on with the unit now as far as Dall sheep.
Where I guide, it's in Unit 25 on the south side of the Brooks. And as far as sheep densities go, it's probably one of the highest in the state. There's quite a few sheep up there versus other mountain ranges that I've hunted in. And man, it's just been a really great place to hunt sheep. So certain mountain ranges like the Chugach, the mountains, I guess, are like geologically speaking, they're young. So there's a lot of cliffs. It's really mean, rugged country, and you pretty much in places have to hunt like up the drainage bottoms and look at the walls, the canyon walls, and then like walk back out the drainage, walk up the main river drainage another mile to the next drainage, and then hunt basically from the bottom up. But one really nice thing about the Brooks is those mountains are, geologically speaking, they're fairly old compared to other mountain ranges in the state. And we literally live out of our backpack. We put on 6, 7, 8, 10 days worth of food and single person tents, and we climb up on the ridges and we just take off hunting and look down in the basins and canyons and whatnot. When it gets dark, we just put the tents up and call it a day. And
And
so
the Dall
I'm sorry,
sheep,
go ahead.
historically Dall sheep, are they all over the valley, meaning they're up high, they're down low, they're on the sides, or are they historically mostly always at the top of the mountain?
It varies. In the Brooks, most of the sheep I harvest are between 42 and 4,500 feet, and most of the mountain peaks top out about 5,000 to 5,600, somewhere in there. There's like a band within there where the vegetation is still kind of green that time of the year, and most of them are right about that 42, 4,500 foot level.
Okay.
As far as north sides of the mountains, south sides of the mountains, I really don't see where that's a major factor. One thing I have noticed in the Brooks anyway is if you're in the mountains and there's like really dark colored shale rock, the sheep for some reason they move through that kind of country versus if it's whiter looking rock or a lot of tundra below some escape terrain, which is typically cliffs. The sheep tend to hang out more in those areas versus the black rock type stuff.
Do you think it's a factor because they're white and they feel like they stand out and so they don't want to be caught in the black shale?
I've never thought about that. I think what it is the food source that they're keyed in on at that time of the year. I mean, there's trails, 1,000-year-old trails beat down through the shale rock, but and I do see sheep in them occasionally because I'm on an area that's like my main base camp is pretty much right on the divider line. If I go downstream about 4 miles, all the shale rock is black, and if I go upstream, most of it is a different color, like a light gray or a whitish almost. And I do see sheep in the black stuff, but they're typically moving through the country, whereas in the other kind of colored rock, they're they're hanging out and grazing. It's so I guess that's one good tip if you're a resident listening to this or a non-resident. You know, if you're in the black stuff, you might want to move locations.
Is the Brooks Range for non-residents? Is it a unit that non-residents can draw? And what is the status of the unit as far as quality of sheep, age class? What's going on with the Brooks Range?
In the winter of 2012, 2013, where I'm at was pretty hard on the sheep population. Matter of fact, I typically just take 3 guys a year. I'm a, so to speak, a chief cook, bottle washer all in one. And I just guide all the hunts personally myself. I don't hire any guides. And I just typically do 3 a year. And that year I just had 2 hunters because one guy ended up canceling on me about a week before season started. And I'm glad he did because when we got up there, when we were flying in, I was looking at some of these ranges that we typically hunt, and they were still full of snow. And I was like, what in the world? So we actually got on the ground and started hunting, and ends up it wasn't snow, it was ice about anywhere between 6 to 8 feet tall. I mean, there was a couple of ranges that the running water from the creek had thawed the ice out, so we were actually walking up, the water in the creek because the ice was as tall as we were. And I don't know how much snow it takes to thaw and freeze at night and thaw and freeze and thaw and freeze to make 6 feet of ice, but it's got to be a lot. So long story short, we learned right away that I think in my area, I mean, well over 50% of the sheep had a severe winter kill situation going on, and I've never had to work so hard to get 2 hunters, a couple of rams. What I typically do is I like to leave about 5 to 6 legal rams on the mountain after I'm done hunting for the season for next year's hunters. And boy, we hunted and hunted and hunted, and both guys got rams, but they were the only 2 legal sheep we saw. So I've actually haven't even gotten any hunters the last 3 years. I've just called my guys up and told them what was going on and canceled their hunts and just told them I wouldn't feel right taking them on a hunt where I think we're just going to be mainly taking your gun for a walk.
Yeah.
So,
is that
the
just
Talkeetna
in
is
Unit 25, or is that for all of the Brooks Range? Is that die off? Is that die off widespread through the Brooks Range?
I can't really speak for the whole mountain range because it's extremely. I mean, it's like 800 yards, or 800 miles from one end of the state to the other, and I only hunt a very tiny portion of it, But from talking to other outfitters, it sounds like it was pretty localized in my area.
Man.
And there's actually outfitters on the same drainage that have super cubs, and they've still been taking the same amount of hunters and still having pretty much the same success. But whereas before they were hunt 1 or 2 drainages, now they're flying 70 miles to drop hunters off in between here and there. So there is still some sheep in 25. It's just that, I fly into a lake and land, and we backpack out of there. And for that little area that I hunt, it was pretty hard. I noticed there's one mountain I have that sitting from base camp, you can look up there with a spot and scope, and there's always been like 69 to 73 ewes. I mean, just every year you can pretty much figure there's going to be 70 ewes on that mountain. And that 2013 season, there was 19.
Wow.
So I've got one basin that I'll always find 20 rams in, and there was 7 in it that year. So they suffered a pretty substantial winter kill, right where I hunt anyway.
Have they started to bounce back at all?
I was in there last year, and, it takes a while. Sheep, it seems to me, I've seen some winter kills in the Talkeetnas, and it's like probably like the 4-year-olds and younger seem to make the winter pretty well, fairly well anyway. So, if you got a bunch of 4-year-old rams, it typically takes 4 more years for those sheep to be 8, which is a legal ram. So, it's kind of like that Colorado area that we were talking about earlier when the deer died off. It takes 5 to 7 years before things start kind of turning around the other way.
Yeah. So you probably expect another 3-4 years and things, if you don't have any other harsh winters, any ice like that, it'd probably be back to normal.
Yeah, I'm thinking so. Yep. I was in there last summer and was looking at some sheep before season started, and And I did see some rams. I saw some 5 or 6 year old sheep. So I would say another couple of years. And, I might be a little conservative and wait like 3 to 4 before I get really serious about it again.
Gotcha. Let's talk about, you mentioned legal rams. So in Alaska, you have to have an 8-year-old ram. That's one question. And the second question is, how old will Dall rams get? Not like, well, maybe the oldest that you've heard of, but like, so I just took a hunter in Region 3 and Unit 15D in Arizona. He harvested a 10-year-old ram. Well, there may only be one ram in that region, one other ram that might be 10 years old or better, and the oldest I've ever heard of is 13. But it's rare in the state of Arizona to see, out of the 100, let's say 100 deserts that get shot, it's pretty rare to see them much over 10 years old. I mean, every year you'll see like a 10, 11, 12-year-old sheep, but there'll be one of them. How does that differentiate, or how does that differ from Dall sheep, where it's 8 years old to be legal, but is there a ton of 10, 11, 12-year-old rams, or no?
No, there isn't. It's very similar to Arizona, the sheep structure in Alaska is. I had a biologist tell me one time the reason they make an 8-year-old ram legal is because they say once the sheep turns 8 years old, 85% of them die that winter. So, if you have 100 8-year-old rams going into the winter, you'll only have 15 the next winter. And then as a 9-year-old, 85% of those die that winter. So it's really rare to find something over that 10, 11 mark. The oldest one I've personally had 100 harvest was a 12-year-old sheep, and I've got a friend that shot one in the Brooks Range, and the rings were stacked up so close it would be hard to tell what it was without cutting the horn in half and counting them from the inside. But we had it at 16, and that thing was just ancient old. But for the most part, in Alaska, an 8 or 9-year-old sheep is pretty much what you're going to find.
Okay, so if it comes down to, if you're on a Dall sheep hunt and you see a legal ram, I mean, there's very few people that are going to walk away from a legal ram. Is that kind of what you're saying, or does it depend on the unit?
It depends on the unit. If you draw on one of those true gash permits or a toke permit, boy, I mean, there's some trophy quality Dall sheep in some of those units, and it really depends on the hunter. If first time hunter, or I guess I really can't make that call, but I would highly recommend harvesting the first legal ram you see, especially in my area. The sheep I hunt in the Brooks Range aren't well known for being giant rams, and I just tell my hunters up front, we're basically looking for a legal sheep. They average about 35, 36 on the full curl sheeps. A lot of the broom sheep are 34 to 35, and they're probably, I'd say, 13 inches on average for the base. So it's not like we're going in the Chugach where some of those 8-year-old sheep have 14 plus inch bases and can be 40 plus inches long. So my hunters typically know up front what we're dealing with, and I've actually talked to a lot of guys over the phone and told them what to expect, and they were wanting something larger, and I just recommended them to other outfitters that primarily concentrate on some of those trophy quality draw areas where they actually have those type of sheep living in that unit. But the worst thing I can think of ever happening for me anyway is having a hunter show up and be disappointed in the hunt, because my goal is to send them home with a giant smile.
For sure. For sure. Let's take a quick
Yep.
break here. GoHunt.com Insider is by far the most valuable tool a Western hunter could give themselves. GoHunt.com Insider are the industry leaders and #1 source for Western hunting for a lot of reasons. GoHunt.com Insider have changed the game for how hunts and hunting information are found. Within a matter of minutes, using Filtering 2.0, you'll be able to filter by state, species, residency, odds of drawing a tag, specific hunting dates, and harvest success percentages to find the hunts that fit exactly what you're looking for. If you are a guy that applies across the West or just in your home state but want to find some new opportunity, There's no better way to do it than using GoHunt.com Insider. As an exclusive offer to my listeners, if you sign up for a GoHunt.com Insider membership for $149 a year and use the promo code JScott at checkout, you'll receive a $50 KUIU gift card. Head on over to GoHunt.com/insider and get yourself the most valuable membership a hunter could have. Real game calls featuring the elk reel. Real Game Calls makes innovative, realistic, and easy to master calls using their proprietary, revolutionary design. They are located and manufactured in Gypsum, Colorado. Their calls were designed and battle tested on some of the hardest hunted terrain on earth. Check out elkreel.com. Use the promo code JScott and receive a 20% discount on all purchases. Go to www.elkreel.com. Okay, Rick, I want to ask you about these. You had mentioned the Chugach, you mentioned the Toke. Give me, in your opinion, say the top three trophy units in Alaska, and maybe compare and contrast those three.
Okay. So historically, a lot of the largest rams ever killed in Alaska have come out of the Chugach range. And I've personally hunted the southwest unit. Let me look here for a second and look at my notes. I was up in Indian Creek one year on a late October archery-only hunt. I can't remember, probably 15 years ago now. And boy, there were some giant sheep in there. So, to be honest with you, any of those Chugach units, there's just a potential for a giant sheep in any one of those units. I think the heavy hitters are like Eagle River. There's always a safe bet of having a big sheep in Eagle River, and same for the Southwest unit, which encompasses Indian Creek. And then that Toke unit is also really good. The horn configurations versus the Chugach and the Toke unit, which is in the Alaska range, are a little different. Those sheep up in the Tokes seem to be, what I've noticed is they kind of they flare out more. Like, so what I mean, when a sheep's looking at you, their horns kind of, I guess, flare out. The tips flare out. Whereas those Chugach sheep, I mean, I've seen 8-year-old sheep where the horn drops way below the jaw and they come up and they're 3/4 curl, and they'd have to live to 15 years old to ever make a full curl. But they're 14 plus on the bases, and they keep their mass really well all the way down and around, and they're just big heavy hitters,
So if you could draw any tag right now in Alaska, which one would it be?
Any one of those units I just mentioned, I would jump on any one of those in a heartbeat.
Okay, and then are all of those units draw only, or can you also buy tags in those units?
Those units are draw only. If you're a resident, I would highly recommend Unit 123, which is residents only, and it's a Chugach permit. But the previous units I mentioned, residents and non-residents can both apply for those units.
Okay. And for the listeners out there, if you're a non-resident hunting in Alaska, you have to have a guide no matter what.
Correct. Yep, you have to have an outfitter. A registered guide is considered an outfitter in Alaska for Dall sheep, mountain goats, and brown bears. And all the other species you can hunt without an outfitter.
Okay, yep. That's good stuff. What is it about Dall sheep? You hunt pretty much everything there is, and you love Dall sheep. What is it about them that you love?
Where they live, plain and simple. I love the mountains. Yeah.
So
and the sheep are just unique animals.
So you like.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You like the drainages. You like the mountains where they live. You like everything about the animal and just that whole country and such.
I do. Yep. It's really rewarding. It's a lot of hard work, and when it all comes together and pays off, it's just really, really rewarding. And some of the views are amazing, and plain simple, it's something some people are just unable to do. So, I mean, it's just a really unique experience, and I just plain simple love the mountains more than anything. I mean, I've had a buddy ask me that question years ago, and I told him, well, if whitetails lived in the mountains, I'd be after whitetails all the time instead of Dall sheep.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yep,
I've heard the meat is incredible as well.
it is. It's second to none. Yeah, I don't even know how to explain it. I've had ancient old 11, 12-year-old rams. We get them back to camp, and we cut the back straps up and throw them over the fire that night, and you can cut them with a fork. They're just like, they're just like a young a young sheep. I guess I could liken it to elk. I've ate some pretty old elk, and they're almost like chewing on tire rubber. And you shoot a 2-year-old cow, and you can almost cut it with a fork. And that's how Dall sheep just are. I've never had a tough, chewy Dall sheep steak, and the flavor is just delicious.
That's awesome. I look forward to getting my Dall sheep one of these days. I want to ask you, so you're not guiding in your area because of the winter kill and you're still letting it kind of bounce back. But you have kind of transitioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've kind of transitioned into doing float trips for Grizzly Caribou combo. Is that correct? Tell me about that.
Yep, yep, that's correct. Yeah, yeah. Where I conduct those hunts, it's probably almost 300 miles to the west of where I guide my Dall sheep. I'm still in the Brooks Range, but I'm on the north side of the range. And we fly into this Indian village out of Fairbanks, and then from there we take a bush plane, and it's about a 2.5 hour flight to get to the drop point, and then we float. It depends on the hunters what they want to do and what their experience has been with float hunts. But I've got on the same river, we can float anywhere. The first hunt is like 40 miles, and where we can get picked up with a plane. And if they want like a longer hunt, not a longer hunt, I'm sorry, a longer float on the hunt, because all the hunts are 10-day hunts, but we can float up to about 88 miles total. And I've taken some guys where they were ambitious and wanted to get out and hike a lot, and that type of hunt I would recommend the one where we're just floating 40 miles, because that leaves us more time to have the tent set up and get up on a high spot and just glass and do some hunting. Whereas on the 88 miles, you pretty much have to float 10 miles a day to make that thing happen in 10 days. So, you're breaking camp down, setting it up every day, and you're pretty much, I kind of consider it road hunting out of the raft. You're just hoping the grizzly or the caribou is on the bank and you come floating by and it's the one you want, type thing. And both of them been extremely successful. I've been running really good success rates on those hunts, and it just really depends on what the hunter wants to do and how they want to hunt.
What kind of caribou are we talking about here?
The first year we were up there, I think I don't know how many we saw, tens of thousands. They were everywhere. We flew in there right before I think it was like the second major snowstorm of the year, and the first one happened about a week before that and got the caribou moving, and we were floating on a river where they mainly migrate up. So it was something like you'd see on National Geographic, and I think I would say we saw a half a dozen bulls that would easily make the record books that year. One of my hunters harvested one, and the other gentleman harvested a really good bull, and after he harvested his, we started seeing some other bulls that were bigger, and he was like, man, I got to come back, because there's some big caribou around. And then, but I tell you what, that hunt was extremely cold. Towards the end of it, we were floating in the river with slush, and we had numb fingers and numb toes the whole time. So I've bumped those hunts up further into the beginning part of August, and the caribou aren't migrating then. And we still see a lot of caribou, but we don't see anything like that one hunt, it was 40 to 60 caribou coming by every half an hour for 10 days straight.
Wow. And
It
so
was
what would
amazing, yeah.
you'd be floating down the river, for the last 4 or 5 years, I got my own raft, fly fishing raft, 13-foot Star inflatable. It's got a frame and the whole thing. Are you talking a full frame raft like where you're back rowing and stuff, or are you paddling? Is it a paddle setup?
Uh, it's the full frame raft. Yep.
So you're
I'm
you're
I'm the guy
sitting
in
in
the
the
oars.
in the middle on the oars and you're rowing down the river. And then if you were to see a grizzly or see a caribou that you want to go after, you pull in below them, I assume, and then stalk back up, or how does it work?
Yep.
Or
You
do you
know,
shoot right out of the boat? I don't know how it works.
no, we don't shoot out of the boat. We typically get over on the bank and get a good solid rest. And that's only happened once. Actually, the other times that we've been doing that hunt, we'll see the animals, a couple hundred yards off the river, and or miles away, to be honest with you, because it's so flat up there. It's just flat, and you can see miles and miles and miles. So whenever we get to a really steep cut bank where we got a little bit of elevation, we'll put the raft over, tie it up to a chunk of willows or whatever, and climb up on the bank where we have a little bit of elevation, and get the Swarovski 15s out on a tripod, and those things are amazing. And we've most of the bears we've spotted have been 2 or 3 miles downstream, either on a caribou kill or just eating berries, and then we'll get back in the raft and float down where we can get closer to them and get out probably about a mile away, and get the wind right and try to keep as much topography or willows in between us and the bear and get as close as we can, and heck, it's worked out really well. Everyone's went home with a bear, and I can't complain one bit.
Now, these are grizzly bears, right? So they're interior grizzlies?
They're interior grizzlies, yeah. So they are substantially smaller than their Kodiak brothers or cousins, so to speak. And to give you an idea, last year when we did that hunt, both my hunters killed what I would consider really large boar grizzlies, and one of them was 7 foot, squared 7 foot. The other one squared 7'6", and one of them made the books, and one of them was a half-inch short of the books. And they were, I think the biologist told us they were 12 and 14 years old. So they were old bears, no doubt about it. And we, a couple years ago, we shot a lone sow. She was 16 years old, and she squared 6 feet 6 inches.
Wow.
In Kodiak, a sow would probably be more like 8.5 feet, that old.
Wow. So
Yeah. So
are there times when you're floating down in the raft and you're floating, and let's just say are there times when you're like glassing right out of the raft and you can see like half mile out in front of you, and you're just glassing the whole way? You're obviously rowing, but are they glassing quite a bit? The hunters?
yep, yep, absolutely. That's exactly what we're doing. We're either glassing or they're fishing for grayling, and I'm rowing the raft.
Are they spinner? Now you're talking my language. So are they spinner fishing for grayling, or are they fly fishing, or what are they doing? Or
you know,
either or,
uh,
whatever
mo-
they want.
yeah, most actually in the past I haven't had many fly fishermen, so we've just bought some aught or double aught meps and little spinning rod, and have had pretty good success that way. But I tell you what, sometimes those mosquitoes hatch off, and I think the fish are popping on the surface. So if you had a fly rod and some midge patterns or some mosquito patterns or anything small like that, black gnat, Griffith's gnat or anything like that, I think you could do really well. But we've actually never even tried it.
Really? And so your success rate on this combo hunt, so on a 10-day hunt, I mean, it's pretty common that your hunters are you take two at a time, is that right? And they both get a caribou and they both get a bear, is that right?
Yep, yep, that's the way it's happened in the past. Yeah, everyone's went home happy and successful. And I typically do it as a combo just because it's so remote and the bush plane costs are so extensive that I have to take two people at a time just to make the thing pay for itself.
And when you're saying you're doing the 40-mile floats, you can do an 88-mile, but you do a 10-day 40 some mile float. Are you Are some camp spots like 2 nights, or are you moving every night on that hunt as well?
On the 40-mile float, it's typically I've got a couple spots where we set the camp up and we leave it up for multiple days,
Okay.
and then we'll float down another stretch of the river and hunt multiple days, and then the last day we typically just get to the takeout spot. Whereas that 88-mile float, I mean, it's some places like up high, the river's moving pretty good, and you can float 10 miles in a day pretty easy. Whereas down low, it's really slow, and it's pretty much all day to float 10 miles. So on that 88-mile float, it's we get up at daylight or before daylight and get breakfast and everything going, and then we're hunting, and then we tear camp down, and then we float most of the day, and then we set camp back up, and then we get an evening hunt. But the thing about that 88-mile float is, you're pretty much hunting out of the boat, and you're moving all day, 10 days straight.
Yeah.
Whereas the shorter float, you actually have some days in camp where you're just sitting there glassing and or hiking in a camp to high spots and glassing.
The shorter float actually sounds a little bit more enjoyable. The 88, I mean, I know how, floating 10 miles a day for 10 days straight, or that's a lot of river miles. So I know what you're going through as an oarsman. That's a lot of water to navigate. Um, let's talk a little bit about gear. It gives you a good chance to really test out and use some gear on these float trips. What are you finding as far as rain gear? Do you like the best? What kind of tents are you liking? What kind of boots are you running? Are you guys in waders or what? How are you doing this?
Yeah, so for the footwear, it's typically hip boots, and even when we're not on the river, the tundra is really wet. So I tell everybody to bring a quality pair of hiking boots that are broken that have Gore-Tex in them. I do not recommend anything without Gore-Tex, because even when we're on the tundra and we're not in hip boots and we're in hiking boots, you're still going to be sometimes in water that's 2-3 inches deep up around your ankle. So you definitely want a Gore-Tex leather hiking boot. As far as tents go, boy, I mean, when it comes to the gear world, it's almost like computers. I mean, the next best thing is 2 months away, and there's so much high quality gear on the market now compared to 20 years ago. It's almost mind boggling to me, but I really liked that KUIU line of gear, especially their clothing. There really isn't a bad piece of KUIU gear. I've kind of learned that the hard way over the years, and KUIU and Sitka both are really, really good. And prior to those companies coming out, I was actually using a lot of the North Face Mountain Hardwear Arc'teryx type of gear because it was tailored to mountain climbers, and it was good, solid, high quality gear, right? So I very rarely even had camo on when I was guiding sheep hunters up until probably 4 or 5 years ago. And now I've got either, I kind of started with Sitka, now I've gone to the KUIU line, and either or is really good. I don't have any complaints about them at all.
What rain gear have you found to work the best for you for those trips?
The KUIU Chugach is really good rain gear. The thing about me is I'm pretty hard on equipment, and I'm in the field probably more than the average person. And I've just learned that I have a tendency to rip rain gear and poke holes in it. So what I do is I just go out and buy either the Grundens line or the Hilly Hansen line of rain gear, the rubberized stuff, and at the end of the season, it's got holes in it and it's ripped in places, and I just throw it away and buy new stuff the next season. And I have in the past bought the high-tech rain gear. You spend a couple $100 on it, and at the end of the season, it's still got holes and rips in it. So that's personally what I do. But I've got several other friends that rave about the KUIU Chugach stuff, and they've been using it for years, and they don't have holes in it, doesn't leak through for them. They really like it.
Good stuff. And then are you packing, like full stoves, or are you kind of going as light as you can with like backpacking stoves and all the pretty lightweight backpacking equipment?
Yeah, I use a MSR Whisper Light. I've used the jet boils and stuff, and when the jet boils first hit the market, I bought one, and I took it on a Dall Sheep hunt. We were hunting on the glaciers, and I learned right away when you put that canister fuel on ice to cook off of it, you get a little half-inch flame instead of a 2-inch flame because it gets cold and condenses. I think those companies have come a long ways since then, and I think they've got their fuel mixtures changed a little bit, where I've heard anyway that you can get a decent flame out of those type of stoves in cold weather. But Boy, I tell you that MSR Whisper Light, I've had several of those stoves for the last 20 plus years, and they just they're like the Energizer Bunny. They just keep on going.
That's
So I typically take it's pretty lightweight gear just because we're flying out in bush planes and we're bringing back caribou meat and antlers and capes and bear hides and skulls. So it's not like we've got like the waist high cots. We've got cots, but they sit 6 inches off the ground. They're all aluminum because they're lightweight type stuff. So we fly out on two bush planes and we've got to fly back on two bush planes. So we've got to, when we go out there, I've just weigh everything out, and we pretty much have, we've got about 400 extra pounds on the planes, so we can have that much more weight coming back. Even though you do eat 10 days worth of food, you get two caribou and a couple grizzlies, and it adds up pretty quick. And then if you're overweight, you either have to pay a lot of money to get a third bush plane back, or sometimes what I've done is I've just burned gear because it's more cost effective to buy new gear than it is to get another bush plane out there.
Yeah, for sure. I imagine by the time you've got two caribou and two grizzlies, capes and meat and the whole 9 yards, you've got a heavy boat by the time you get to the end.
Yep. Oh yeah, it's 1,200 pounds because I've weighed everything. I've actually got a scale that like outfitters and the Bob Marshall use for packing horses, and they'll weigh their panniers so they know exactly what a pannier weighs for each side of the horse. And I bring a scale like that with me, so I weigh every ounce out, and that way I know we're exactly at 1,000 pounds per plane. We're not guessing,
Yeah.
because those bush planes, I mean, there's been lots of guys load them heavy and fall out of the air because of it. So I make dang sure I know what the weights of the planes are, payloads anyway.
I want to ask you about floating down the river as far as grizzlies, and have you had them come? I saw a video a year or two ago where they were floating down the river and a bear comes charging out of the brush basically at the boat. Have you ever had any kind of encounters like that are kind of hairy?
I bet I saw the same video. Was there a couple cubs on the bank?
Yeah, and I think he
And the
they were paddling. They weren't in a row structure frame boat. They were paddling, and I want to say he just
Oh,
pulled
okay.
out his pistol and was shooting to the side. I don't think he was actually shooting at the bear. I think he was shooting by the bear to scare it, but it like charged out in the water.
Yeah, yep. I think I've seen that same video. You know, as far as the float hunts go, no, I haven't had any encounters like that. I've been in the Chugach and Alaska range hunting sheep where you're bushwhacking through the alders and you can't see very far, and all of a sudden there's a bear standing up on its hind legs, like 40 feet away from you, popping its jaws. And I had him charge me and kind of hop around on the ground and woof at me a little bit. I've never had a full-on charge where anybody's gotten attacked, but one thing I've noticed about the bears in the Bricks Range is they are a lot more aggressive than the coastal bears that are eating salmon. And I don't know why. I think it's probably because they were born hungry and they die hungry, but they're definitely more aggressive.
How many days would you say you spend a year? And maybe it's changed since you're not doing the Dall Sheep right now because of the winter kill. But how many days would you say you spend, you know, quote unquote, out there in the bush?
Sure, boy. When I first started guiding, I would go in. We would trail horses into to this one camp for an outfit I was working for, and I want to say we would go in about August 1st, 2nd, 3rd, somewhere in there. Sheep season always opens on the 10th, so we would always be in there about 5 or 7 days before season started. And then I would come out after moose season closed, which is usually September 20th, and I'd come out, 21st, 2nd, 3rd, somewhere in there. So I don't know off the top of my head, but it's usually the whole month of August and half of September.
Hmm.
It's a pretty safe guess.
Yeah. And you did that for like 20 years, didn't you?
Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
That's pretty neat. That's
Lots
pretty
of
neat.
fun. Yeah, I love it.
What else do you do for a living? Is this your only source of income, or do you do something else?
No, I actually work in the oil field in northern Alaska, and I work 3 weeks on, and then I have 3 weeks off. So that's probably the main reason I was able to, take so much time off of work. I've worked for a couple companies up there, but I'm just fortunate that I was able to get the time off and have people cover for my shift. And I mean, like that one year, you were talking about the elk tag I drew in Arizona there. That year I actually drew Arizona and a Utah elk tag, and I guided, I think, when did I start guiding? It was pretty much like August, September. And long story short, the way my work rotation panned out, I left work like July 23rd, and I had 3 weeks off. And then I took a couple hitches off for guiding and elk hunting, and I literally came back to work just before Christmas. And the guys at work were joking with me, and they're like, "Hey, who's the new guy?" 'Cause I've been gone hunting so long.
That's awesome. Let's take a quick break here.
Yeah.
PhoneScope is a company that makes custom-molded, precisely engineered smartphone digiscoping adapters. Photographing wildlife has never been easier. It is simple to text photos and videos from your smartphone and share them with your friends. PhoneScope stands behind their product with a 100% money-back guarantee. Get yours now by using the JScott16 promo code and receive 10% discount on all purchases. Check them out at PhoneScope. That's PhoneSkope.com or on Instagram at PhoneScope. I have known the owners of the Outdoorsman's in Phoenix for over 20 years. They are the authority on optics and hunting gear. Outdoorsman's is the leading designer and manufacturer of high-quality tripods, mounting accessories, and pack systems for all hunters. Their customer service is the best in the business. Go to outdoorsmans.com or call 1-800-291-8065 and use the J. Scott promo code to receive 10% off any products. Okay, Rick. And then you also spend some time in Montana. I assume that's kind of during the winter months. You spend some time in Montana. Where do you reside in Montana when you're not in Alaska?
There's a little town in southwest part of the state that I grew up in, and my basically my whole family still lives there, so I fly back and visit them quite a bit. The folks are getting up in age, so to speak, and I'm just trying to spend as much time with them as I can while I still have them.
Yeah, good for you. That's fantastic.
Yep.
What is the hunting like in Montana that you've done lately? How has that gone?
It's good. Between my brothers and I and my dad, we've got about a half a dozen horses, and I grew up with horses my whole life, and we pack them into the wilderness areas and can get away from probably 80% of the hunting crowd by doing that. If you can, you dang sure get away from all the foot hunters. We get back in there about 10 or 12 miles and set a wall tent up and just kind of hunt out of that. And you still do see horse hunters way back in there, but my brothers, sometimes they can't get time off of work, and they're kind of restricted to the road system. And boy, it's anymore. When we were kids growing up, you'd go up the road with a spot and scope hanging out the window on a window mount, and there's only one or two people doing it. And nowadays, you go do it, and there's like 30 people doing it. So they
yeah.
They really don't like it when they can't get time off of work and come into the wilderness with us, because there's just hunters everywhere, it seems like. But we're hunting general units, If you get lucky and draw a permit, you can get into some pretty good hunting still, because it's just 50 hunters on a unit versus hundreds.
Yeah. Have you noticed, living there your whole life, or growing up there as a kid and what have you, and hunting there, have you noticed that still some of the areas that are way back in, are they just as good as they ever were, or are they better or worse, or how do they rate?
I think they're just as good. I've always heard people say, "Oh, the good old days," and we're back then, and in the 40s or 50s or whatever. And I don't know. I don't really buy that. I think the good old days are right now, because I've got some friends that every year, they kill big bulls with their bow and arrows on general units and even their rifles. And if a lot of it is out hunting the hunters and having the right optics and the right mindset and getting in there and getting after it and making it happen. And boy, it's there's still some good hunting around. I mean, there is a lot more hunting pressure, I think, than there was when I was a kid for sure. And of course, the gear and the optics have just come a long way since way back then. But no, I think there's still some good hunting to be had. And when it comes right down to at the end of the day, I mean, it's all about having fun for me. So I mean, if I can get a good bull versus a giant bull, if I'm hanging out with my family and having fun, that's all that matters.
Good for you. That's awesome. Where do you stand? You said you've killed two bighorns. You've killed three Dall sheep. Have you killed a desert? And what states do you apply for all the states for desert sheep, or where are you at chasing a Grand Slam?
I apply for every state. There's 13 states you can apply for sheep for, even North Dakota, believe it or not. I typically do that every year. I think I've got 17 or 18 points in Arizona and Nevada for desert sheep. I actually don't apply for desert sheep in California just because the draw odds are so horrible, and you first have to buy that non-resident hunting license. But yeah, I typically apply for every sheep tag I can, and I buy a raffle ticket for every raffle ticket I can, or raffle I can. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Good for you. Good for you.
Yep,
What about craving someday to go stone sheep?
I am. Yeah, I am. I've thought about that, and those prices are, boy, they're
It's
getting over the top. I think
it's crazy, isn't it? I mean
it is.
it's
Yeah,
it's really crazy. It's something that I dream about, and it's just so expensive. It's just hard to swallow, you know?
it is. Yep. I had a hunter one time, and he had all the money in the world, and I asked him. I said, "Well, when are you going to go stone sheep hunting?" Because he hunted with me a couple times for dolls, and at the time, my doll sheep prices were about a quarter of what the stone sheep prices were. And he goes, "Well, all the stone sheep is a dark doll, right?" I go, "Oh, pretty much. I mean, they're kind of, I've heard they're their own species, but for the most part, they're thin horn sheep, and yeah, there's a dark doll essentially." And he goes, "Well, the hunt costs are four times as much." He says, "Are you telling me I'm going to have four times much more fun hunting stone sheep than doll sheep?" I said, "Well, I don't know about that." So I mean, he pretty much told me he wasn't going to go stone sheep hunting because of the costs, but. Yeah, I would love to go someday. If
Yeah,
I could get in on a good cancellation hunt or buy a raffle, I'd be all over it.
for sure. Is there any other animals out there that you haven't hunted that's kind of you're eyeballing or that you're really looking forward to drawing?
Hmm. Boy, mainly that desert. I've been building points and crunching numbers and looking at draw units and yeah, I'd love to go desert sheep hunting one day.
Yeah, it's
Used to be I'd apply for the best units with the hardest draw odds, but nowadays I'm kind of balancing them both out, and in some states I kind of go for the quality units, whereas other states I would just love to go on a hunt where just a chance at like a 155, 160 type ram, I'd be ecstatic.
yeah, and I mean honestly, I'm kind of the same way. The older I get, the more it's like I kind of need to let go of, trying to shoot some giant ram, although it'd be incredible. I got to start looking at, how many more years of, do I have 20? Do I have 25? Do I have 30? I mean, how many years do I have where if I actually drew a tag, could I actually go? And then it becomes you start looking, going, man, I need to be picking some of these maybe mid-tier units just to give myself the best odds I can and kind of be in the game on the deal.
That's my mindset exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I'm like, I'm 42 now, and
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
might be 70 by the time I draw one, and I'd much rather be 50 than 70, just because I'm thinking it'll be a little easier to get around the mountains.
Yeah. That's where I'm at too myself. For
Yep.
sure. Well, it's been awesome having you on. Is there anything for people that haven't applied for Alaska? Any advice that you would give them? I think they doubled the tag fees this year for once you actually drew. I'm not 100% sure about that. But is there any just random advice you'd give someone wanting to apply for Alaska or, buy a hunt and come and hunt in Alaska?
You bet. The number one thing for a non-resident applying for a Dall Sheep hunt is you have to sign a contract with the outfitter before you apply for the area. So basically, if you draw, you're going to be going with that outfitter. So do your homework, talk to some outfitters. There's some great guys out there, and call the references and ask for even references that were unsuccessful, and basically pick the outfitter that pretty much matches you and your personality the best. Because it comes right down to the end of the day, if you're into it 4 days and you're exhausted and your legs are rubbering and your lungs are burning, you want to be with somebody that you kind of get along with and you enjoy their company with. Even, because you can go to one of those draw units and be hunting the same unit with multiple different outfitters. So call references would be the main thing, and make sure you have a contract signed before you apply for a Dall Sheep permit.
That's great advice. And then to come hunt with you on a grizzly caribou combo, are those draw, or can someone contact you and just make arrangements, and you take care of all of that right over the counter?
Yep, that's all over the counter stuff. Yep.
Okay.
Alaska Alpine Outfitters.com, and send me an email, give me a phone call. It's all good.
That's awesome. Well, Rick, it's been great having you on the podcast. I just truly have always enjoyed talking to you when we've been able to chat, and you're a wealth of knowledge, and appreciate you sharing the time here with me and the listeners, and wish you the best in the draws coming up. We're about at draw season right now, coming up here in most states, coming up this spring. So wish you the best of
Yeah,
success on that, and yeah, Alaska Alpine Outfitters.com. You got a great website, and it's just always great talking to you. So I appreciate you spending time with us.
you bet. Thanks, Jay. Thanks for having me on.
All right, buddy. You take care, okay? God bless.
You too. Yep. Bye.
All right, bye.